So I just want to introduce the man who needs no introduction, Dave Dobler. Come on up, Dave. Have worked with Dave and admired his efforts on behalf of this community and this environment for many, many years. He has really been a leader and just shown extreme dedication, giving so much of his time and energy and expertise to this movement and this cause and this movement. And he did give me a couple of things that I will really quickly just note the various civic boards that Dave has served on, which is an extraordinary amount of time and energy, which is the Biscayne Bay, the Miami-Dade County Biscayne Bay Watershed Advisory Board that he currently serves on, and is doing an excellent job on the Miami Beach Marine and Waterfront Protection Authority, the Biscayne Bay Marine Health Coalition, and he was the former chair of the City of Miami Beach's Sustainability Committee. And he and Dara founded, of course, Volunteer Cleanup and have done hundreds, literally hundreds of cleanup. So thank you so much, Dave.
Thanks, Rachel. I have been following Rachel for years, and I continue to try to meet up to her actions. And while she was, you were Miami New Times, one of the top 20 environmental citizens. I was 2017 Citizen of the Year. So top that one. Thank you so much, Rachel. This is fantastic. I'll go back to this one. So let me just introduce our stormwater panel. I'm very excited to have this conversation. Anybody who's seen me or talked to me, stormwater is really, really important to me. And to just quote Mr. Lee Hefty, what happens on land ends up in the bay, and stormwater is one of the major conduits. So this is a really important conversation, as we've done a lot of work with the fertilizer ordinance. We've done a lot with the Connect to Protect septic to sewer conversion. I consider stormwater to be the next big opportunity here for us. So on our panel today, I'm going to first introduce Rashid Istanbuli, who is currently the interim director of DERM. He's a detail-driven registered professional engineer with over 34 years of experience, possessing a Master of Science in Engineering Management and Bachelor of Science in Engineering, specialized in environmental engineering. That's a lot of engineerings in here. Fantastic. All right, and then we have, who's next? We have Alex. Alex Barrios. For the last 15 years, Alex's experience has been focused on heavy civil construction, specifically underground infrastructure such as water, sewer, and drainage systems. He serves as the assistant director for Miami-Dade Transportation and Public Works. He has worked as an inspector for Miami-Dade Water and Sewer Department, tasked with QC inspections of work completed by in-house crews, oversight of contractors performing final roadway restoration, as well as survey and land layout of the dimensions for final restoration to create cost estimates used for the county's bidding process. Fantastic, thank you. Yanir Vega is currently the stormwater utility manager for the town of Cutler Bay. He coordinates the daily activities of the Stormwater Utility Division within the Public Works Department and Department work/permitting with that of other county, state, and federal agencies. It looks better on paper than reading it aloud. All right, and then we have, yes, applause. And then we have Ansley Sampson, who is currently the general counsel for the Everglades Law Center, who partnered with Miami Waterkeeper on this report card. Ansley's focus is on greater Everglades restoration issues, including implementation of the comprehensive Everglades restoration plan and the state and federal waters law that shapes Everglades restoration efforts. Before joining the Everglades Law Center, and for over 20 years of practicing environmental law, Ansley worked with Earth Justice, the Southern Environmental Law Center, and the Natural Resources Defense Council, and litigated cases under the National Environmental Policy Act, Endangered Species Act, Clean Water Act, Water Resources Development Act of 2000, and the Administrative Procedures Act, as well as various state environmental laws. Fantastic. Hi, Ansley. think I'm a little over my skids here with this panel. All right. When you don't know the answers, you go to the people who know the best. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I've got a couple of questions here. What do you guys think about Waterkeeper's report, and what grade would you give yourselves?
Also,
Go for it.
pleasure. Thank you for having me. I'll go ahead and lead that off. I actually met with Samantha from Miami Waterkeepers earlier, and she slapped me on the wrist. Said you need to do better in the town. Actually not happy with the grade that we got, so we're going to be meeting with her in the next coming weeks and figuring out where we need to improve.
What grade would you give yourself?
I would say a B,
A B.
only because there's always room for improvement.
So I will reiterate a sentiment. There's always room for improvement. The county's got the largest amount of unincorporated roadways that we have to maintain. It's several thousand miles. We do with what we can. We have an all-in-house staff that does the cleaning. We contract out very little of it. That way we can do our own quality control. So, it's a B. I think it's fair for us. There's more that we can do, but we have had active programs for water quality for the last 20 years, both in engineering and on the maintenance side.
Dave, you're not asking me, right? You don't.
Yeah.
You're gonna ask the
You're-
regulator
you're-
of how the
Yes.
the report card is?
I would love to hear what you think as a
So-
regulator.
So as jokingly, I think I told everybody when we took a look at this draft of the report of the actual report card, I would have been grounded had I brought that report card home. And I'm not, I'm half joking. The truth is, none of us would be here today if there wasn't a problem. So if we had to give, we had to give each other a grade here, really, the fact that we're here talking about stormwater and the looking at their quality, we got to give ourselves an F, right? That's not to say to any one of you guys that you're doing a bad job, or that, that we're not all doing the right thing, because we've got to kind of reset the framework of how we think about stormwater. I heard Rachel say, here's a picture of stormwater, which we hate stormwater. We can't hate stormwater. Stormwater is the key. Hardeep here, if he's still here, stormwater is key in recharging our aquifer. It's key in providing fresh water to our bay. It's key in keeping, at bay its saltwater intrusion to not intrude into our groundwater well fields. It's key for so many things. So if we have to look at this holistically and kind of reset, historically, stormwater has been, we've tried to keep the water from flooding and out of our watershed, in the sense of we need to live here, right? So nobody wants to be wading in knee deep or hip deep water. So we've been trying to get the water out of the watershed quickly. Now we've got to look at it differently. So now we've got to keep it up in, above ground for a little longer to treat it for water quality. And I think everybody is here for that purpose. How do we do that? What's the balance of managing floodwaters, but at the same time, keeping our resources in mind to provide that water quality? So, I hate to remember, to go back to what you asked, Dave. Absolutely, we need to do a better job. So,
Ansley, what do you think?
Well, the question I was thinking to myself is, how would I grade our report card, right? Like if they're all being graded on the quality of their stormwater compliance, how are we? And I think the important question at some level is, it depends on your rubric. And so if our rubric here, if what we're being graded on is the extent to which we fairly evaluated stormwater compliance of these permittees, I think we did pretty well. Like, and based on the information we were given by them, I think we did pretty well. Now that I've heard everyone be willing to take a B, I'm like, well, maybe I won't give ourselves an A- anymore. I need to take the B+. I think the only place where we fell short on that metric was that you saw Rachel, long list, 20 factors. However, there's more in these permits, and we had to, cabin it a little bit. So we, our report card is not all inclusive of everything that this permit requires. So that's thing one. But bigger picture, and I'll try to be faster, is this again is a picture of stormwater compliance. And we are at a conference about Biscayne Bay health, ecological health, and water quality. And this MS4 permit, this municipal stormwater permit, is one tool in a toolbox to get to that goal. It happens to be a particularly important tool and a timely one because these permits are coming up for renewal this year. And so in order for us to use this tool well, we need to get in the weeds of it, understand what it requires, what's being done well, what's not being done well, and what else is needed. If we don't understand the weeds, we cannot use it to effectuate its goals. And its goals are minimize the discharge of pollutants to the maximum extent practicable, to eliminate non-stormwater, discharges out of these systems, and to do this with the goal of meeting water quality standards. So.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm going to, I've heard from multiple sources that our state Florida Department of Environmental Protection requires permit holders to clean their stormwater systems once every 5 years. Forget about compliance for a second. Is that sufficient enough to protect Biscayne Bay from nutrient loads and stormwater?
Let me take that one for a minute. So one things I'd like to always explain is there's a concept out there that every drainage structure drains to the bay or drains to a waterway, and that's not correct. Over 90% of our drainage systems are self-contained and they drain to the groundwater. And all the pollutants are caught in the structures that are cleaned once every 5 years. So to me, I would say that generally that's an adequate number for those self-contained systems. For the remaining portions that do drain to a waterway, to a water system, to the bay, we could look at additional cycles that could be added. But we do need to differentiate between those two because it's very important that we look at it separately. Because if we're going to tackle such a big problem, we want to tackle the ones that directly discharge first. That's the lower hanging fruit. And then we can look at the others, which honestly, I would tell you, it really isn't a major issue because we do clean them and we pick up that material out of the structures and they don't get a chance to flow out anywhere else. They're just contained into those systems.
I'll go ahead and follow up with the municipal standpoint. As far as MPDS and the requirements, I look at it as a minimum, not as what you need to do. No, it doesn't matter what's on the permit. That's just like the Florida Building Code. It is a minimum that you should adhere to. Over in the town of Cutler Bay, we pledged $300,000 from our stormwater fees every single year for storm drain cleaning, to the point that we clean our storm drain system every 2 years, religious. We have the town divided up into 10 quadrants, and we'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the following year we'll do 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then those years in between we'll touch up on a couple of hotspots that we know about. So maintenance is definitely key. I do think that storm drain maintenance should be on a more reoccurring cycle than every 5 years. I do understand that from Miami-Dade County, it's a different task. The town, for example, we have 2,100 drainage structures. And about 33 miles of pipe. Their numbers are much higher, so it's easier for us to tackle something like that.
Rashid, what do you think? Are we cleaning our storm drain systems frequent enough?
Again, you bring the regulator into the room and you're gonna get a different answer most likely. So, and Dave, I know you've got a bunch of questions and I see the timer going off, but I think we've got enough, to give you a little background. So we've got them, and I think, you and I had this conversation at the dais, in the Biscayne Bay advisory board. 40 years ago, the county found itself in a bad situation with respect to wastewater infrastructure. Fast forward today, we are in a better place than we are today, but we learned a lot with respect to aging infrastructure. It took millions of dollars in fines. It took a consent decree. It took a second consent decree. More capital. Billions of dollars in capital improvement, budgeted or non-budgeted, that utilities have to put up. These are lessons learned that we should apply to stormwater. Today, under Chapter 24, obviously we're talking about MPDS. MPDS is definitely the baseline. It's regulate what the state has been delegated from the federal government. Locally, we have that power in Chapter 24. We have design standards in which we construct, design stormwater systems and certify. However, what we don't have is the back end, which is certification, operations, and maintenance. O&M is key to having a successful system. Why did I bring up the infrastructure with respect to wastewater? We have a model today in which we require a CMOM, a comprehensive maintenance and operations manual, asset inventory with respect to wastewater, sewer systems, a very comprehensive sanitary sewer evaluation survey, which, goes every, I think it's a cycle of 5 to 10 years, depending on the size. These are all concepts that we can apply today to stormwater. Is it in the code today? No, not quite. It will require some code change. But again, you bring the regulator into this room and we're gonna look at it a little different. So there is no compliance of, getting a C or C plus or a B minus. It's compliance. We strive for 100% compliance. And a big key to this is not only the operations and maintenance, but us culturally looking at the manner in which we design systems a little different. Again, to go back to what I said prior, it's no longer about moving water. It's about moving water and treatment. And a part of that treatment is the operations and management of those systems. So to answer your question again, I'm sorry that it took me this long. Is 5 years enough? No, it's not. Is if it's going to groundwater is enough? Probably not, because, to quote my former boss and my mentor, water knows no boundary. So whether if it goes directly to the bay or goes to the groundwater, sure, it's not as impactful right away, but it is an impact to the environment. So.
Ashley?
Okay, very quick. Very quickly, no, 5 years is generally speaking not enough. This made me think of one thing, and just respect to the town of Cutler Bay, when we were looking through their reports. The reporting structures sort of ask for detailed compliance. And one thing that was wonderful about Cutler Bay is when you acknowledge this was 2 years ago, so it may be different now. In the reporting for pollution control boxes, one particular stormwater structure, you said, we're having some issues tracking our maintenance. So we are going to get a electronic stormwater, like a GIS system, to help locate these and ensure our maintenance is done appropriately. I don't know if it's happened, but it was such a good level of awareness of where weaknesses were. And to this point, in terms of how often you need to manage, I think the best way to think about this going forward is through a computerized stormwater management system where you can really track these individual structures.
And just so you know, to go back to that model that I was talking about, the wastewater, we track. We actually, it's a code requirement, and all the municipalities comply with is that they have to provide their atlases, and then we keep it in a GIS format on an annual basis, because we all know systems change. And that's the way that you track, or you're able to keep track of those assets and know exactly where everything is connected to.
So on our MS4 permit, there is Miami-Dade County and 32 co-permittees, right? And everybody runs their own stormwater programs for the most part. What kind of collaboration and oversight happens between the county and co-permittees? And what kind of collaboration or oversight would improve all of the municipalities' stormwater programs? Rashid, why don't?
I'll attempt to tackle this one. So there is collaboration, obviously, being, with respect to the Miami-Dade County component, because we've got 32 co-permittees. All of the, to call them submittals, have to come through the county. So for instance, we are compiling all the information that goes into that FPDS that goes back to the state. However, that to me is more of a paper collaboration. What we need is more engagement, and that's where we're lacking, and we're looking to move forward in engaging the municipalities and creating I don't want to call it a summit because it's obviously a summit, but a roundtable in which We already have roundtables for municipal building officials. We have roundtables for municipal utilities, mainly water and sewer. What we don't have right now is a stormwater. And that is probably the quickest way to start getting engagement right away. So I know that we're working with Urella here soon to put a workshop together in the next, couple of weeks. But that's only to start brainstorming and how we start that active collaboration. Because a lot of the idea that I'm just, mentioning to you guys right now is exactly what I'm going to be mentioning in that workshop. And we're going to have to work together, because at no point do I want to be the one person standing in the room dictating to everybody, this is how you shall do everything. Because at that point, it would almost assume that I, insinuate that I know everything, and I don't. I clearly don't. But every utility, every municipality has great ideas and has, believe it or not, regardless of their grade, are all working towards that same goal. And I think we could, definitely work together to put something that works for the greater good.
I have a quick follow-up for that. Actually, I've known Alex Barrios for a long time. We work very close together within the municipality, and you guys know what I'm talking about. Every municipality has roads that are still owned and maintained by the county. We work together with Alex and his staff, and whenever we see a hot area, which what we call the drainage is not working properly or pounding on the road, we'll shoot pictures, send it over to Alex and his staff, and typically, the same week he sends staff out there and it gets cleaned out. We've actually sent information to him, and we've collaborated on the Southwest 216th Street drainage project, which was from 97th Avenue to Old Cutler Road. And now we're collaborating again from 97th Avenue to, from 97th Avenue to 87th Avenue. And then now we're collaborating from 97th Avenue to Old Cutler Road, which is a very hot area for the town.
Just some areas that are important, I think, for collaboration from our permit review would be illicit discharge inspections. You'll often see reporting that, from a locality that Miami-Dade County is doing the inspections, but there isn't an awareness of what precisely is happening. And that's important because this is the effective prohibition of non-stormwater discharges, which should, just to flag something quickly, should involve septic tank discharge as well. So how and where you're doing these illicit discharge inspections should be sort of coordinated. Also, permit reviews, when private parties come in to do construction projects, there's supposed to be a review to ensure they've gotten their federal and state permits and they're complying with best management practices. And there didn't always seem to be awareness of who was doing what. So you might refer to another locality, Miami-Dade County or another government was doing those reviews, but there didn't seem to be awareness of exactly where they were happening. So,
And sorry to keep on jumping in here, but collaboration, actually, we just, Louis Aguirre actually started all this, because wherever he is, it's sending a whole bunch of videos over to Lee Hefty on with respect to illicit discharges of turbidity that we saw going into the bay from a lot of these construction projects. Actually, we did the investigation. So November to February, we conducted these hotspot sweeps all along the bay, all the storm water basins that discharge to the bay. And the key component to that sweep was collaboration with those utilities. City of Miami was, huge because they had so many construction projects. I mean, we popped in a matter of 3 months, I think we popped 1,200 manholes and found, I think the percentage was something like 10 to 15% of those drainage structures were impacted. And they were impacted, from whatever activity, but more than likely than the construction. The point is, there is collaboration, and the city was super responsive. From the time that we brought it to their attention, within the hour, they had a vac truck there and they had already taken care of the drainage structure. So the fact that the rainy season has already started, that we haven't seen anything yet is partly because of that, but it's not the solution in no way.
So those sweeps happened. Are they still happening? Is that an ongoing, or was that kind of a point in time? Let's go ahead and see how this works, see what pops up.
This was a one-time, I'm gonna caveat this. It was a one-time sweep in the dry season. based on the observations, in fact, I've got a draft report that I'm supposed to be getting out soon, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. Yes, this will become something that that we will be doing on an annual basis on the dry seasons, just to make sure that that first flush of rainwater, we don't see those kind of issues that that obviously we pointed to the end of last wet season.
All right, so I focus mainly on plastic, but we know that excessive nutrient load is the biggest problem in Biscayne Bay right now. We've heard a lot about septic and fertilizer. What happens to the grass clippings and leaves when they enter stormwater systems? And is that a significant contributor to the bay's excessive nutrient load?
So what I can tell you is that our drainage systems, when they're designed, and there's older systems that don't comply, that anything new going into the ground comes in with pollution controls. So there are baffles, there are weirs that hold back water to allow it to filter itself out. There are sumps within our structures that retain that heavy vegetative debris or sand and silt that, it's usually a 2-foot sump, which allows us to, extend our maintenance cycles a little bit longer and collect it in the system. So yes, we do have, anything that is new or anything that is new or has been designed in the last 20 years has these features in it. Now, there are older systems that are, that have not been retrofitted, which do have direct discharges, which don't have those features.
You were going to say something?
Yes, to follow up with what Alex mentioned, one of the things we also do in the town, we have a big issue with landscapers and the lawn clippings. They seem to not get the importance of not blowing the lawn clippings into the storm drain system and causing the extra maintenance. So we actually meet with HOAs regularly and talk to them about it. And we're actually in the process of trying to develop a plan where landscape contractors would have to register with the town in order to perform work within the town. And that way we're able to hold someone accountable when we see that kind of issue with, as far as lawn clippings getting blown out into the road and then going into the storm drain system. But it's going to be a tough program to implement. And right now, at this moment, what we've done is we've actually developed a Spanish and English flyer, and we provide that and push that out to the entire community, because education is what's really going to help with that.
So I compost at home, not very successfully. But I know that in a period of about 3 months, when I put my food scraps and I put, the greens and the browns and I mix it up and I keep turning it, in about 3 months, I have some pretty good nutrient rich soil. And then I can put that in my garden and my butterflies come and my milkweed grows. If we allow the grass clippings and the brown leaves to sit in our stormwater systems, and in 3 months that stuff composts, but then we clean our stormwater systems every 2 years, at first flush when it rains, if we haven't cleaned it out, what happens? Does that goes straight into the bay, right?
No, actually does not go straight into the bay. As Alex has mentioned before, about only 10% of the system that we have in the town, and also the county mentioned, actually flushes into the bay. The remainder of the system is self-contained, so we'll actually percolate back into the ground with treatment. So can we do a better job? Yes. The key is to actually keep the pollutants from getting into the drain with maintenance. So don't litter, pick up litter. Street sweeping is extremely important. We do street sweeping every other week. We're in the process of finding extra funding. We actually like to sweep the town every week, if possible. And the numbers are there, and we report the numbers to as part of our MS4 permit. We have to provide the total nitrogen, total phosphorus removed. So it's very, very important.
So keeping it out of the storm drain system seems to be, from what I've heard, we had a stormwater webinar. The Biscayne Bay Marine Health Coalition during COVID, we had one, and it was incredibly informative for me. And what I learned was that street sweeping is the most cost effective. It is the easiest way to capture all of the trash and leaves and grass clippings to prevent it out. How do we feel that Miami-Dade County and the other co-permittees, because we only have two of the co-permittees represented here. And I know that there's a lot of entities that have a lot more direct discharge into Biscayne Bay. So do we think that street sweeping, both at the county and the municipalities, is that an easy opportunity for us? I mean, I'm loading this question right now, but is that an easy opportunity for us to improve what goes into the storm drain systems and thus what goes into our water tables and out to the bay?
From the municipal standpoint, 100%. As far as debris making it into the storm drains, the further from the storm drain that you are able to remove that debris, the cheaper the maintenance is going to be. I can tell you off the top of my head, I think it's around between $25,000 and $30,000 that we spend a year in street sweeping, which is really not a lot compared to $600,000 that it takes to clean the entire storm drain system in the town. So if I can keep that debris from actually making it into the drain, I'm saving money and doing better quality work.
I just want to flag from the street sweeping and litter collection generally, the current MS4 permit, the stormwater permit, only requires municipalities to report on what they do. It does not even include a minimum requirement. It should. So that is one of our recommendations. You figure out exactly what that minimum is, but you need to have a baseline requirement in that permit, in my opinion. Second, there's also like the street sweeping. They say it's impracticable for it to happen on certain kinds of streets without a curb. And several municipalities say, thus we're not reporting on this, we're not doing it. We need to solve that problem. So that's just current permit changes that need to happen.
But we have to be careful to keep the MPDS separate from, I don't know that you want to have that, again, I'm speaking as a regulator. I don't know that you want to have that requirement in the MPDS. What you can have is on a separate, I'm gonna call it a CMO, have it in there, and then that becomes the enforceable document. Because, again, the MPDS has its purpose. The CMOM would have its purpose as well, and it would tie the utility to that, and then that becomes the enforceable, because you can change it over time. It becomes a dynamic document that can change over time. Maybe it has a once every, I'm just giving you numbers, once every X amount of cycle, but maybe now it requires 10. So you could easily make that change there versus in the MPDS. So that's why I would be a little more careful to see where would you put it.
And maybe the permit has a floor. And your CMOM can wrap up from, I don't know as much about the CMOM, but you could ramp up from there. But I think that the regulatory document should have a floor, should set the standard. Absolutely.
And the CMOM is something that the county would build with its co-permittees, or is that a state?
So, and now we're using this term CMOM. It's, it's.
You said it twice.
That's what I've been using. It's my. Yes, the county would set the stage for the submittal of that CMOM, and then that becomes the enforceable. That's the reframing of the thinking of how you would deal with the operations and maintenance of the system. Is the CMOM going to be tied to the MS4 permit renewal come December? I would, well, right now I'm talking, this is hypothetical, Dave. This doesn't even exist today, but in envisioning this and workshopping this with the municipalities, it would be a separate entity that would have to comply with the baseline of the MPDS. But the living document, the living O&M lives in this document that is would be required for all the utilities. And it would be administered obviously by the local regulatory agency. How do we get that CMOM? What do we do? I'm pretty sure I've already got people writing it up on the camera, on the other side of the computer. But that's really, it's going to require some code change. It's not extensive code change. It's things that we've already been debating and thinking that we needed to do. So. All right. Excellent. So while I have 2 more pages of questions, I want to thank everybody for joining me on this. Everybody knows that I like to ask questions so that I can learn. And sometimes those questions may pose uncomfortable answers. So I am very grateful for the 4 of you coming up
and talking to us and looking about and thinking about how we might be able to improve stormwater quality.
there any chance I can say one quick thing before we get, I'm
Yeah,
feeling the floor.
yeah.
And I just, because I've heard, I know so many people are talking about this reasonable assurances plan right now as a substitute for a total maximum daily load. And I just, this permit is another place where that will need to be implemented. The current permit does not mention it. The new permit will, but it also needs to do it right. We have had total maximum daily loads for bacterial pollution in the C6, C7, and C8 canal since 2012. It has a requirement in there for like a required reduction in the amount of pollution. What we have seen to this point, and you can correct me if, is a bacteriological control plan that was put in place last year with some additional monitoring. That's what we have in 10 years from a TMDL for bacteriological pollution. Our next round of permits needs to do more with this reasonable assurance plan to reduce whatever the new word we're going to use for nutrients. I heard earlier, it can't be nutrients. It's like something bad, right? Those are good for you. But whatever our new word is for too much nitrogen and phosphorus, we need this plan to be implemented in these permits and enforced faster than we've seen before. So that's my soapbox.
One final question. Is plastic a pollutant?
Absolutely.
Do we have any requirements or regulations or conversation? Because when I talk about plastic, everybody, I get a little bit of, yeah, okay, whatever, Dave. But when I talk about nitrogen, I talk about phosphorus, those are things that you're required to measure. Are we measuring, quantifying, thinking about how we reduce the amount of plastic debris that comes from our streets, goes through the storm drains, the 10% that go out, but we're talking about the rest of the county, which has much higher amounts of discharge, right, as a percentage. There's no metrics around plastic. So how do we start the conversation that plastics are a pollutant that are worthy of being metriced, quantified, and set reduction goals?
That's
Well-
a chemistry. That's definitely a chemistry question, Dave, because plastics are litter for the most part, right? Now, when it starts breaking down, which obviously takes a long time, I heard somebody mention
450
microplastics.
years.
Yeah, just a couple years away, right? We have a long list of cleanup target limits that, obviously that plastics degrade to, but that's like down to the chemical level. So for a water bottle to degrade to a point where you're going to see it dissolved in the water, that's the level that we have it, regulated. What you're referring to is more solid waste, litter, things that, of that nature, that obviously it just shouldn't be there. Shouldn't be on top of the water, shouldn't be on below.
The stuff that was picked up on Clarington Island, the bottle caps and the cigarette butts that go through, the rack systems. I've gotten very familiar with this stuff through my engagement with City of Miami Beach, who, went from cleaning those storm drain systems once every 7 years. Now they're cleaning every year, right? Because most of their stuff directly discharges out to the bay. So I would love to see some discussion about that material, which is greater than 5 millimeters, which is how California measures it. So I'm out of time and I'm going to get pulled off the stage here, but that's just me on my soapbox. But I want to thank everybody for getting up here and sitting on a little bit of the hot seat. But I appreciate everybody's participation. Thank you.